Hello, people. Hello, Nick. Hello, Vibu. It's been a while since I've seen you around here, Vibu. I see you back. What you've been up to? It's a bit too close, huh? Wah. Hey, Coffee Diction. Might as well switch over to this guy over. I've been busy. Moved to a new country. Oh shit! Was that for a job? Did you get a job? Let's see. Right. Oh, for uni. Oh, interesting. Let's see. I think we've got everyone set up for today. Hey, Frida's Art! Welcome, welcome. Glad to see you here. How are you doing? We're gonna kickstart it in just a second. I'm just gonna make sure that we have the Discord at the ready as well, so that I can have a look at what people want feedback on too. Where are we? Oh, let's actually do that. Because I haven't been keeping up with what people have been working on. Just wanna a quick glance. Cool. Got some high poly progress on the car. Nice. Like nice curves happening inside of the interior. That's awesome to see. We're gonna look at Sheila's work in a bit. Mark is working on a cool gun. Oh shit! Look at these nice medals. They look great. Yeah, gorgeous metal. Exactly. Vitaly knows what's up. That's awesome. Sam is working on The Last of Us bar. Overhauled the material shader. Yeah, that stuff needs to happen, right? Like, there's nothing you can do about that. Sometimes you just have to go back and fix the materials. Doug plays Valorant. How do I get motivation when the industry is going to shit? Honestly, just ignore what's happening in the industry, because by the time you get in, like, this stuff might be over. I know stuff might suck at the moment, but I also know like a shit ton of people that are still getting jobs as well. So yeah, I know it sucks. I feel bad for all the people that are affected by all the stuff that's going on. But if your goal is to get into the industry, honestly, the best thing you can do is just ignore what's currently happening and just focus on the future. Because I truly believe that we're going through like a massive hiccup right now, which is still like leftover from like investor money like flooding into games during COVID. So this stuff is gonna go over as well. It's gonna take a little bit more, but yeah, just focus on the future. It's a good question though. I think a lot of people are I think a lot of people are struggling with that question. Coffee grinder. Oh, look at all the cool details on it. This is cool. So nice. Hey, Snowbat. Also, as a disabled person, it's really hard that there are not a lot of remote jobs. Yep. Yeah, and there's more than there've ever been, honestly. So I know it's not really adding a lot to the conversation, right? But yeah, keep trying your luck, right? Like keep working on your stuff. And yeah, keep chipping away at it. Gotta stay positive, gotta stay motivated. You got this. Nice. So a little bit more work on the composition over here. And I think most of this stuff we kind of had a look at last time, right? So it's awesome to see everyone progressing. Let's see, are we up to date with this guy? Ooh, okay. This has changed quite drastically. It's cool. Okay. It is time. It is time to actually dive into the work that we're going to be looking at today then. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't want to close it. Put that up here. Okay. What do we start out with today? I think we're gonna start out with the last post on here. So that is Chill Bill. Let's have a look. See here? Not that I use this menu now. Okay. So Chill Bill is coming in here and is working on a project that's called 2044 Slums, and asking for some feedback on how I could make this better in composition, lighting, and any other assets that I should add. Looking to post this project on ArtStation, so trying to make it the best I can. The foliage is from Quixel. Oh, which you're gonna replace with your own soon. Okay. That's cool. I think, honestly, the first thing is, where do you want people to look, right? Like the focal point. The first thing that I want to bring up here. Focal point, like, what are we looking at, right? Like, there is something interesting happening here. Like, I keep bringing this up, right? You can do the squint test to help you get better at noticing, like, where you're pulling the attention to, right? So currently the attention is kind of like divided between this area. This area is pretty bright as well. There's a light over here, and then you have like the light up here as well. I think that would be like the first step, right? Like, try to decide on where you want people to look. And I think, honestly, what I would do with the lighting is play way more into the lighting that's on the bus stop itself, rather than on the light that's shining from the street lamps, right? It would be freaking great to, like, this is what I think, right? Like, it would be awesome that we have, like, pretty bright light coming from here that kind of just, like, illuminates, like, the whole bus stop, right? And we kind of have that, like, bleeding onto the streets as well. That we kind of have, like, this radiant effect from the light coming from these illuminated advertisement. And I think that's going to help a lot with also pulling the attention to the thing that is like the main focal point, right? Which is probably like the bus stop itself. And then what you could do is balance all the other lights in accordance to the other one, right? So you want to have like the dominant focal point in the middle of your scene, and then you could tone down all the other ones in comparison to the main one. So yeah, I would honestly like pick this as a focal point. I'm just gonna add like number 1, right? Like number 1 would be my focal point here. Because that's kind of what we're focusing on, right? Like a derelict, or maybe like a not often used like bus stop in the middle of nowhere would be cool. Kind of gives it like a mysterious vibe, you know, especially if it's only lit up by like the one single advertisement, and maybe there's like a shitty street lamp overhead as well. But yeah, like a focal point is definitely where you want to start. And then in terms of the composition, like, that's also going to work in line with your focal point, right? I think with what you have now, like a very centered composition could work as well. But you're gonna have to deal with a scene that feels like really static, right? Because right now everything is kind of like straight on. Like you have the road, you have the buildings, like everything is basically very head on, which could have like a really interesting effect, right? I kind of think it works for the composition that you're trying to go for. And I think also then having the bus stop in the middle kind of just works in terms of the eerie feel of everything, right? It's kind of like in dead center, kind of has like this off-put feel where something is off, but you don't really know what. It kind of helps to work with like the mysterious feel, in my opinion. So yeah, I think honestly, like the focal point and the lighting, if you work on that, I think it's already going to be like a massive improvement. Then the last question was on any assets that you should add. We're gonna... So I'm gonna bounce this back to you, right? Because you wonder like what kind of assets you can make. I'm gonna ask like what kind of story you want to tell with those assets. Like what is the thing that is gonna set this scene apart, right? Like you already have like a couple of assets here. But what do you want to convey, right? Because that's the real question. Because I could give you like a ton of asset examples, but they're all going to be dependent on the story that you want to tell, right? And that's going to be my version of the art compared to what you want to convey yourself. So think about what story or like what mood you want to go for. And let those two infer the assets that you think you should make. Because the reason why I put it that way is because if you want to go for like a more mysterious kind of mood, like the only thing that you honestly need to do about a scene like this is to change the lighting. That's it. And I think you can make it like really mysterious, you know? But if you want to tell something, obviously you gotta then add like more assets to it, right? Yeah. And I would really honestly just focus on like the center, right? Really focus on like the center. Like think of it as like street photography. I think honestly there might be like a lot that you can get from street photography. I don't know if you're still here, Duck Plays Valorant. But did that answer your question? I know it was pretty straightforward, but yeah, if there's anything more that I can help with, just give me a shout. So yeah, like look at street photography, right? Like there's a lot of really talented like street photographers out there that can give you like a really nice indication of how to focus an image. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. Focus on the focal point, and then the assets, let them be dictated by the story and the mood that you want to sell, right? Honestly, what I want to see with a piece like this, where it's not necessarily about like making like an asset zoo or making it seem like, hey, I've got like a bunch of cool assets that I've worked on. Go for something more artistic, right? Like follow your gut, like look at inspirations and then try to condense them into your vision of this art piece, right? So yeah. Thanks for sharing your work, Chill Bill. Looking forward to the next update. Who do we have next? Sorav. Look here. Sorry for missing your portfolio review yesterday. I didn't realize that I went so over time with like all the rest of the people, so unfortunately I couldn't cut you in at the end. We'll be back next month. Do another portfolio review session. Let's see. What are your questions? So Saraf is saying, this was an old project and I've just decided to continue working on this prop and would like to get some critique before I start the next steps. So critique on shape, proportions, and other pieces that I might have missed out or overlooked. I'm also open to tips on reducing the poly count without damaging the silhouette. Okay, I think for this one, I think I do need to get like the ref in here as well. So that we have like a little bit of a comparison point, right? What I might do is I'm just going to do something like this instead. So that we can more accurately like compare the two. Okay, so there's a couple of things that jump out immediately, right? When we're looking at the actual reference over here. Let me actually use a different color for this one. Or like let's call them differences, right? So green are all the differences that I can immediately see when it comes to the prop versus what you're actually making, right? First thing I can see is that this little section is actually inset into the actual mesh, right? Like into the asset. It's not something that floats on top of it. Whereas in your version, it kind of does that, right? It kind of has a lip, and then it's still like the base version of the asset. Which is not what is happening here. It seems like it's actually a speaker that's inset into the frame itself. Then we're kind of missing these two pieces. So those two sections are kind of missing as well. Some of the proportions, like there's this little edge here. Seems like there's way more room here on your version. And it's kind of like if we look at the shape, right? This is where references are super handy, right? Like it's to see the shapes right next to each other so that we can do like an accurate comparison. And I do this stuff myself as well, right? Like if I have something that I'm building from a concept, I like to put them right next to each other so I can like accurately compare the two. So that also allows me to see stuff like this, where this goes straight up until this point, and then it goes into a curve, right? And then we can see that the point where there's a transition here roughly matches with the area here, right? Although on your end, like the transition happens like way earlier. So then you have like this kind of gradient or like kind of curve happening. Whereas you would probably expect that only to happen at this point, right? So you want the curve only to start over here, rather than where you currently have it. And then let's see. the megaphone section also feels like way too big in comparison, right? Especially if we can kind of compare to like person height, right? If we were to translate this kind of section here to roughly the size of like a human, like it's kind of like the upper torso and like the head, right? So that means that we can kind of use this measurement in your example and kind of measure it here as well, right? I'm doing this very roughly, right? But that means that you possibly want to shrink this thing down to this size, roughly. Because it feels like really imbalanced compared to like the main shape that is supporting it, right? The base that's supporting it shouldn't feel like it's like outweighed by the thing that's on top of it. And then also, if we then compare like where those two things, where the tail of this sits in comparison to like the megaphone part, right? We can kind of see that the top of it is kind of where this thing ends. So it will also like work a little bit better with the new proportions, and then we would still have like that little end section on top of it too, right? So we probably need to like make this a little bit thicker as well. Feels a little bit more chunky, especially at the end. We could have like a gradient that kind of goes like this, or like a shape that goes like that. I think yeah, from what I can tell, that's it for like the main proportions, right? I see ya! Hi, Bodhi! Great to see you both here. There's like a couple of other things that I want to point out as well, and it's these kind of shapes, right? Where this prop is really based on curvy shapes, right? It has like a lot of elegance because it has so many curvy shapes. So those shapes are going to be really important. So what we have here is kind of like it curves up and then it kind of goes into like a section like this. That isn't happening here yet either. Right? I kind of want to see like a more pointy thing. And this is where you can add more geometry as well, right? Because currently this rounded section just doesn't have like enough geometry to work with. So I would definitely add like more loops here. And then where stuff gets flatter, right, we can cut out those shapes. So like this could be like one large section, like one large poly. And then you have like more polys where you need them. Same for this kind of section, right? It's kind of like the same curve, but opposite. We kind of have like this sort of shape going on. Make sure that those shapes are like just really nicely done. There's a tool for this that I use. I can't remember if this is Max or Maya, but the edit edge flow tool is going to be like a lifesaver for this, especially when you're working with curvature. Look into this tool that you can use. It's going to be really, really nice. And then we also got like a little thingy here, like a little foot. Like a little bit of polish. But yeah, that's mostly it on like the differences in proportions, right? It's a big radio. Yeah, it's a cool looking radio as well. I love the concept. Edit edge flow is in Maya? Yeah! Yeah, I just didn't know if what we're looking at here is Max or Maya. It's been too long since I worked with it. But you're 100% right. Like it's selecting your edge and then you can shift right click and select it from the menu that pops up. That's awesome. All right, and then we get to this section over here. So we've let's see. Leonardo is saying maybe you could try to extract the concept and flatten it like you would see it in the blueprint. Yeah, you could. And I think there is a tool called SPy, right? That allows you to like match perspectives. Or there's probably other tools as well, which could be really helpful. I think that could be great, you know, if you're struggling with like getting the proportions right, that's absolutely awesome. But to be honest, like if you this is not something that's very common, right? Or that you're not really taking the time for in the industry. So I think what is a good habit to have is the stuff that I was doing here, right? Like where you have like the character right next to it. Look for common reference points, right? Usually a character. That's why I jumped to this immediately, because I was like, oh, this thing is roughly the height of like a character's body, like upper torso, and then the head, right? And then I can translate that because I know how tall it is in here, and then I can move that over to this, right? And I'm kind of doing that with a lot of things, right? You can even use the same kind of thing to see like how tall this needs to be, because what we're also seeing is that if you have this character standing in front of it, right? Like in the half of the upper torso, right? Around the midpoint, that's how tall this should be. Right, so if we put it right next to it, if we follow the grid lines, right? That's how tall the asset will, well, the top of this curve is probably going to be. Right, and you can see that like extrapolating like grid lines in the perspective of things can really help you like figure out like the scale and the scope of certain things, right? Because now I immediately see that this thing is just like way too big in general, so you probably want to scale it down as well. So that is roughly where the top of the asset needs to be, right? So that means that the curve is gonna, yeah, be at the top there. So you can see, right? Like how, especially when you have like a character reference like right next to it, use that to your advantage to then use and extrapolate the data that you need. Yeah. Yeah, if I do want to say like if that would help you to flatten out the concept and to see it like as a blueprint, and you find a way to do it, that would be great, because that can be really helpful as well. Now, for the second part is we talked a lot about like the shape and the proportions and any other pieces that you missed. But there's also like a little question that you had about like reducing the poly count without damaging the silhouette, right? The biggest thing that I can say is definitely like the megaphone part. Right, so let's take another color. This is probably going to be the thing that you would need to reduce like the most. And the way that you can do that is whenever you have like a couple of lines, right? Like a common way of reducing it. Like let's say this is your geometry, right? This is like the top view of like a section of your geometry. The way that you can reduce that is by combining some of these points. So pick another color. What we'd actually do is we would combine these edges, like the outer edges, into the middle one. And then we can get rid of like all this stuff over here, right? And if you then like apply this like multiple times across the whole thing, right? So you can do this, and then you can do it again over here as well. You can have like a really efficient shape. Let's see. How about this? Yeah, so you would like basically cut out like in triangles, like a lot of these lines, right? And make it like really efficient. And you can cut this by like 70%. You know, because a lot of these lines, they're no longer needed to support the silhouette, like at all, right? I think around here, you still want to have some of them to support the silhouette, but as soon as we go, well, even around here, right? Like this is the most important shape, honestly. So I would keep all of them here, but as soon as we go into this territory, like we can cut down on like all of these. Right? And then do that again in the next step. You can kind of see, like, even from my, like, pretty bad draw over here, that we're already dealing with, like, way less. What are we doing here? Already dealing with, like, way less geometry, right? To probably just do one section and symmetry it, that is a great idea. Yeah, that would really speed up the workflow, right? If you take this, like the central line here, and then you just build like this one section, you optimize it, and then you do like a radial symmetry on the whole thing. Will drastically speed up the workflow. Yeah, this is the way that you could really like optimize like this whole shape. Hey, what's up, guys? Hope you get some good feedback. Oh, thanks for the support, Fruity. It's been a bit. It's nice to see you back. So yeah, like there's a lot that you can do with optimization here. There's a lot that you can do with optimization here. And then also there's parts where you can definitely add more, right? Like I want to see like a nice flow in this shape over here. Right? I want to see like the nice curves and then go straight until the next curve begins and then add more geometry again. So this is the way that I would play that, right? So where does the transition roughly begin? Let's say it happens here. You can cut all these out. And then you have like more geometry up here, right? Add geometry where you need it. Because a lot of this stuff like doesn't need to be there, right? And the way that you could optimize that is, again, like you have this point, try to push it to like another edge, right? And that allows you to cut this edge out. Do the same thing here. This loop goes all the way around, but it doesn't serve a purpose, so we can probably just cut that one out. Yeah. And especially this shape. Yeah. Same technique as we did, right? Same technique. Just reduce that, and that's gonna look like nice. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there. There's definitely like lots of learnings that you can take. Use the edit edge flow tool because that's going to be a life changer for doing anything like this. It's such an awesome tool. When I switched from Maya to Blender, it was like one of the first things that I looked up because I was using it so much that I needed it in Blender. So it's also available in Blender, and probably Max has the same sort of tool as well, or an add-on. Yeah. Thanks for posting your work, Seraph. Thanks so much. And best of luck. Keep me in the loop. Next one up, we've got Nadia. We're going in Discord order. Let's have a look. Hi everyone, I'm back with an update. Did quite a lot and ready for feedback again. We'll love some feedback on the ground materials, which are made in Designer. I would love feedback on the grass meshes and textures. For the grass, I made an atlas with Quixel textures. Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, we're not really gonna give like feedback on the textures then, right? Because that's Megascans. Made my own meshes, materials, vertex paint mask. I do feel doesn't quite match yet. Okay, cool. JJ16, the edge flow is hit or miss sometimes. Depends on when you know how to use it. Yeah. Sometimes you have to be like pretty specific with it. But yeah, it's still better than watching me try to match like a curve by hand. Because that was how I discovered the tool. Someone was like, hey, don't you know about this? It's like, no. So Nadia, let's have a look. Designer texture first. So dirt. Really tricky to get right. I think from a distance, it's okay, right? From close up, it doesn't look that great. I think the base of it is quite okay-ish, right? You have the colors there, and there is something happening. But I don't think like the stones are really convincing at all, right? They could definitely use some work. Yeah, I think from like a distance, it works okay actually. But what you could do when it comes to the dirt, right, is look at it in some sort of a hierarchy, like a hierarchy of shapes, right? Because right now, all the shapes that you have are mostly like very small detail shapes, right? Apart from the little stones in it. But what could actually be interesting is if you have like larger clumps or like some sort of formations or shapes that are bigger, and then have like a build up or like a build up to the details, right? So that it reads good when you look up close because it still has the details, but it also reads good when you look at it from a distance. I think that is gonna make this work. You do have to be careful, of course, when you add like very specific shapes to it, that you keep the tileability in mind as well, right? JJ16 is coming in with a tip. Says using the slow blur for the rocks with a Perlin noise. Oh, so rocks is Perlin noise. Plus blur, like a slow blur. That's cool. Little tip. Yeah, I would say again, focus on big, medium, small, right? Like the hierarchy between the shapes. If we pull up like a quick dirt, and I've taken many pictures of dirt, but probably buried somewhere. Let's see, what if we just go to like textures.com or something? And this is the thing, right? Like as artists, we have to kind of take like a lot of creative liberties, right? To make something look like really interesting. Something like this, for example. Like just if you look at like the hierarchy of shapes, right? You have like the bigger pebbles, and you have the smaller pebbles, and you have like lots of smaller variation in it, right? Something like this could work really well. Something like this is also cool, right? Where you have like some more what is that, like hard dirt, you know, like where you have like a little bit of like a rock or something like that, like a sedimentary layer underneath it. Could be interesting as well. Because yeah, like sometimes what you have is very uniform stuff, right? And I don't think it works that well. Right? I don't know. Doesn't work that well. Yeah. So yeah, keep the hierarchy of shapes in mind. But I will say again, I feel dirt is one of those like really tricky things to get right. I feel the more subtle something is in Designer, the trickier it is to really nail it. So yeah, keep shapes into account. And then what was some of the other feedback that you were requesting? So we'll love feedback on the grass meshes and the textures. So that's an interesting one because I mean the grass meshes look good. Right? Let's have a look here. Like this stuff looks really good. Don't really have anything to say on it. Looks great. It's also a bit tricky for me to give like accurate feedback when I don't have like a wireframe and you're asking me to give feedback on the mesh, right? Because it could look really great, but it could also be like way too dense as well. Because especially when you think about foliage and grass specifically, it has to be like really optimized because you're going to be scattering like thousands, if not 10,000s or hundreds of thousands of instances across like a world, right? But from what I can tell here, looks good. Just add a question mark in. Like, just is it optimized, right? That would be my question, basically. And the material looks good. It's Quixel, right? So it kind of is up to you if you still want to change it or not. But I think the base of it looks good. But that's the thing that you're struggling with, right? Like, because you're saying that it doesn't quite match well, and you would love some tips and tricks or feedback on that. Cool. So there's like a huge amount of tips that I can give on that, right? It just depends on what kind of look you want to go for. Like the first tip that I will give is doing something of like a blend gradient, right? Especially if you're just going to be blending with dirt underneath it. So that means that it doesn't necessarily need to sample the terrain, right? You could make it so that it kind of samples the terrain using RVT, which is like runtime virtual texturing. You could look into this sort of setup because then it's basically going to make the terrain texture available as a texture that you can sample in other materials as well. So what you could do then is allow the grass to sample the terrain color from underneath it. And if you then have, let's say this is your grass, right? And you have a gradient that's like, this is blending the color from your grass. This little section is blending the color from your dirt onto your grass. That could really help like push the two together, right? There's like great tutorials or like video tutorials about this. People explain it really well how to set this up, especially where you can control the gradient as well. So yeah, check those out. Then I think the biggest issue is this stuff, right? Where you want to have like a grass terrain texture underneath your grass, but the style of them doesn't match, especially here. You can see that this is like very realistic, like very curvy, and then this is more like just sections like this, right? So I think if you wanna go for that realistic look and you're already using megascans already, one thing, and I haven't tried this myself yet, right? But one thing that I would do is I would take the assets that I get from megascans, I would lay them out in top view to kind of give me like some clusters of like clumps of grass, right? So what I mean is from a top view is imagine that we have like a couple clusters of grass. Right? Look at my beautiful art skills. And what I would do then is I would take that into Marmoset. Marmoset specifically because Marmoset allows you to bake a base color as well. And I don't think... I mean, I haven't updated in ages, so maybe Substance does as well, but last time I checked, Substance doesn't allow you to bake base color, right? So what this allows you to do is you would have like a plane with like a couple of grass clumps on top of it, and you bake that onto an atlas. And what you can do with that atlas is then use the atlas scatter node inside of Substance Designer to have those clumps scattered on your dirt, right? So that you're getting like a one-to-one representation of your Megascan assets and you bake them into the terrain texture. You gotta be careful with how far you go with this technique, right? Because you can't have like wild bushy grass then bake down onto a plane, because that's gonna look really fake. So you probably have to do some trickery where you make it look like really short grass, right? So you could convince people that what is on the terrain plane is actually like fake little grass rather than big luscious grass, right? But this would be like the workflow for that. So grass clusters, then bake in Marmoset. And then Atlas scatter. In Substance Designer. Also, the reason why I like this workflow so much is because I'm biased towards like the Atlas scatter method now, because it completely modularizes like your work. Because if you have this grass atlas that you've made yourself, or like you baked yourself, right? You can then also just use that in your next projects, like on other substance materials, because you have the atlas lying around anyway. Which is awesome, right? And I started doing this now where I have an atlas of leaves, I have an atlas of stones, I have an atlas of branches. And whenever I make something, like for example, dirt, I just take that all in and I just blend it together. I'll see if I can find like a quick example here. Don't know if I have like a zoomed in shot of like my dirt specifically, but I guess this one will do. Right, but you can kind of see that like all these like little pebbles, they are just like a little stone atlas that I made, and I kind of just use an atlas scatter to then have them in my material. Right, and like I kind of did like the same thing with my grass as well. Well, be fair, not really. I didn't use the atlas method, but I could make it into an atlas. I opted for like the more traditional technique. Yeah. Something like this could definitely work. If this is like too complicated, definitely doing a change where especially the width of them match up, right? Yeah. Or what you could also do is have like an individual couple of strands that you can then use in like a radial scatter. Forgot the name of the specific node, but you can make your own clusters with like individual grass leaves as well. That could be another option too. And then the last thing is for the wall. Oh, the wall over here. Okay. Okay, cool. So for this wall, I think to make it look like it's been abandoned, right? We have to do a combination of two techniques. And I think one of them you already have, right? So you have the tileable here already, which is great. Ding. But what we're missing is unique meshes. What we're missing is unique meshes that we can then add to the sides to really convince us that this is like an actual wall and there's like still like a piece of the wall just standing here, right? Because then you could kind of build out like a section of wall. So let's say this is the section. You could build out a section of the wall with unique stuff, right? That then blends into the tileable over here. So you're combining the best of both worlds where yeah, you have like these unique rocks, right? That you then combine with like a tileable. And once you have like the two, right? Like once you combine the two, like it allows you to make like smaller stacks like really easily as well, because you have like unique rocks that you can stack on top of each other, right? And you could have like random piles of rocks too, or like stones in this case. Yeah, I think that's like the main thing I'm missing here. The stuff that you have going on in the texturing works really well. The only thing that I can say from this picture is watch how different the color is from the grout compared to the stones themselves. The rest of it seems to look great, from a distance especially. Day 16 is asking, what is an atlas? So an atlas is something like this, right? Where you treat it as like 4 individual sections rather than like a unique texture. An atlas is kind of used in like a lot of situations. For example, a texture atlas can also mean that it is combining like multiple textures into one bigger atlas, but it's doing it for like memory optimization or something like that. But when I mention atlas here, I'm specifically talking about having a texture that is built out of like multiple textures here, right? In this case, like multiple sections. And then this refers to just like a node that allows you to use an atlas scatter where it can read like each thing as like an individual output. And then it can use that information to scatter stuff randomly. See if I can give an example here. I have a quick example. Third from the Gonna see if I can find something. Mud. Even gonna open? Seems like that didn't work. Oh, still kind of works for our example, even though like the reference, like one of the references is broken. So this is what the Atlas scatter node looks like. And what it does is it can read like all the different inputs from like all these branches. And then you can see that I have like a bunch of smaller branches in my dirt. It will read them as like individual inputs and then it will scatter them accordingly. So this is like a really helpful node where you can really like modularize like your entire setup, right? So you can see that I just have like a basic dirt and then I just have like my pebbles and then I add like leaves on top of it, but the leaves are broken. And then I add like branches on top of it. And it gives you like a lot of control over how it's blending together. Does it have to be 2x2? No, I don't think so. I think it has to be square. I'm not sure. That's something you'll have to figure out yourself, because I'm not sure. Yeah. Like, it really allows me to just have like a modular piece, like a modularize like my entire Substance designer workflow. The idea, like where I got this idea from, is actually from one of the workshops that we had with Derek Elshoff. So massive shout out to him, and I'm also gonna share the link to that workshop too. Because that really opened my eyes to like the possibility of it. Let's see. Where is he? What? Okay. There you go. That's the link to the workshop that that Derek gave, and where I got the idea from as well. A big shout out. Okay, cool. Thanks. No worries. No worries. So Nadia, I think that's roughly gonna be it, right? We're gonna just crop it to what's essential here. So yeah, for the walls, have a combination of a tileable texture and then combining it with like unique pieces to make it more unique. That's gonna give you like everything you need for like all the rest of the walls as well. And then you can kind of tweak them accordingly, right? What I would definitely say is try to finish the look of your tileable wall first. Or, well, no, like finish that one first so that you have like a benchmark for your unique assets as well. And then make those. Cool. Thanks for putting up your work, Nadia, and best of luck. Keeping an eye on this. Next up, we're gonna go to Alex. Where is Alex? Couple of questions here. What can I improve on the materials? Cool. So, material talk time. I added references here. Just two that I quickly found before I started streaming, right? But the first one is going to be really useful for main color difference, right? In color variation. Hey, made it! Hey, Sunny Day! Yeah, I think if you really want to lift up like the materials, like this is the stuff that you need to try to incorporate, right? This brass material is actually like really interesting to kind of break down and get like all the different layers into. right? Because there's like a lot of layers. If you really start looking at it, right, like you can see like people's fingerprints that have kind of like left their mark on the material, because I'm assuming what is going to be like oxidization, right? So it's a really interesting material to get this sort of stuff onto it. So this is it about like the main color difference and the variation, right? And then obviously what is really interesting is that you're going to see more of the oxidization over here, because that's what people are going to be holding, right? Like that's going to be where they're going to be touching, where they're going to be looking through. So there's going to be more color variation over here compared to the rest of it. Then we got this close-up shot as well. You can see there's a lot of really interesting details like in the texture itself. So first of all, we have like these, like, for lack of a better term, like anisotropic like lines that are kind of going through like the entire material, right? We can kind of see them to like a certain extent here as well, but they kind of have like this real, they add this like directionality to the metal as well. That how you spell it? Question mark? Or directionality, you know? You know what I mean. And then number 2. Number 2 is like all these like tiny spots, right? Because we kind of already talked about like the main material variation, but like all these tiny like flecks, right? Tarnish is probably more than just oxidization. At least silver just oxidizes white, but darkens more absorbed sulfur from the air. Got no clue, honestly. I think that's the closest that I'll probably get, because I have no idea. Like copper oxidizes, right, where it has like this very recognizable like blue greenish color, right? I don't know if brass is going to react the same way. I'm just making an assumption based on where people leave fingerprints, right? So there's probably going to be like moisture that's going to come from it, but got no idea about a specific thing. You might be right. So we have like these flecks and these spots, and also just like little details, right? Like these like little oil splashes, probably. Question mark. And then also like I kind of put it as like one layer, right? Like one detail to pay attention to. But it would be really great to pay attention to like the differences in the spots, right? Because you have like these kind of dinks, right? Where you can see like they left like a bigger impression in the surface. But you also have just like dirt on top of it too, right? And they're all under spots, right? But yeah, they have like a difference there. Right? I just throw in a grunge map and some generators and call it a day. Yeah, that's what a lot of people do, right? On most assets, that's also what I would do, because I'm not an asset artist. But if you do like a singular asset and you really want to show off your texturing skills, you have to go to the next level. So you can still use that as a start, right? There's nothing wrong with like a grunge map and some generators, and some additional filters. But what usually sets the good stuff apart from like the mediocre stuff is that people went in and they painted on top of it, right? So let's say you have like a grunge map with a generator, and then you paint some certain areas out so that you kind of kill like the generic feel of this, and then you duplicate that layer again, but you change the painted mask, right? Or maybe you use like a slightly different filter on top of it, and those additional layers stacked on top of each other is gonna make something feel awesome compared to something that feels like it's built with generators, right? Yeah, so just like attention to detail, right? Like the layering here. These were some pictures, by the way, that I found on like an antique auction house, right? They always have like really awesome pictures. But yeah, this sort of stuff is like great for inspiration. So yeah. And there is some stuff here, right? Like there's already like some indications that there is layering, because this stuff makes sense, right? There's going to be dirt that's going to be captured under like the sliding mechanism of it all. This is great. You just need to take that attention to detail and extrude it, or like extrude it, like kind of do a pass like that on the rest of the prop, right? And again, subtlety is king, right? Like start with more base color variation, and then you add like subtler base color variation, and it's layers upon layers, right? I started doing those details, but didn't add them everywhere, I guess. Yeah, and I can tell, right? Because I can tell that you spend like more time on this section compared to some of the other sections. So there are glimpses of like it looking really good. Let's see. There was also like the additional thing that you said. Let's see, the ornaments and engravings, and then wood and leather, but it's kind of boring. Oh, I found a leather one. That would actually look really interesting, but I don't think I still have it. Let's see. Yeah, so it was kind of something like this. I'll just add it on here really quickly. Where you can do a leather thing, right? And make it look really interesting, I feel. You can kind of have like the straps on it. Yeah. I think the wood is fine too. Like if you want to go with a wooden handle. Like I don't really mind of the finish, right? It depends on what you want to do with it. What I would say is that the wood is probably going to need some love as well. Let me get rid of these guys, because the wood is not really convincing. It feels like too stylized for what it is right now, right? And again, that's where some good reference can help a lot, depending on what kind of style you want to do, right? I'm just having a look at some ref to see if I can find some stuff. Oh wait, didn't you have one? Nah. Maybe I removed it. Yeah, but just to say that the wood can definitely use like more work, right? It feels like very stylized at the moment. Again, subtlety with that sort of stuff is key, right? Subtlety. A clean look is how magicians keep their brass instruments really well polished. Funny that we play video games and we look at these things for a second and then we move on. Now I realize it, I'm more amazed by these artists. Yeah, like honestly, this is something that is not necessarily reflective of the games that you would play, right? Like some games, they put an emphasis on these details, but most games, they will probably not go to this attention to detail unless it is required for the game, right? So for example, if you're building a game around like being what are those things called, like an outlook in like a crow's nest on like a pirate ship, you know, this prop is going to be really key to that game, so you're probably going to invest more time in making it look good compared to if this was like in a random museum in like a random open world game. Like if that's just going to be like a couple of tidables and like some additional generic dirt on top of it, you know. But sometimes, and this is the interesting thing about games, sometimes it's more about selling the impression that everything is detailed without everything being detailed. The same thing is something that you can observe in concept art, like really well. Like concept artists that have kind of mastered this technique, they put a lot of focus on like what you're going to be looking at, and then as soon as you start looking more into the picture, like a lot of it is gonna just like be blurry and like it's gonna be indicated, right? But it's not gonna have the same amount of detail as the focal point itself. Which is super interesting. Yes, but let's have a look. What are some of the other questions? So, which components beside the rectangular lights and fill lights should I use to light up a prop? Those are all you need. It's more about like how you balance them and how you use them. That's the key, right? There's enough examples, and I keep talking about it. I sound like a broken record, but like the 3-point lighting setup, right? It's pretty basic, but I think that offers like a good starting point. And I think also what's going to be important for this kind of prop is where you render it, right? I think if you want to just render like a singular prop just by itself, I would honestly go for Marmoset compared to Unreal. I think Marmoset is going to offer better visual fidelity and quality out of the box compared to Unreal for these kind of things. So it's something worth considering. But yeah, I would definitely go for Marmoset. Well, let's not say definitely. I would go for Marmoset if you already have like a little bit of experience in it, and if you have the program, right? It's not a must, but it would definitely make your life easier as well. So that would be definitely an option. And then appreciate any tips or resources regarding rendering a single prop in Unreal without building a level around it. Yeah, sure, I can send you one. We have made a workshop around it as well by Angelo Tsiflas. Share that one too. Actually, just go to the website. Easy. Where are we? Here you go. That will be like a good workshop for you to check out. I think you've already done it, but this will probably go through like the entire process of setting it up into Unreal. I'll think about Marmoset as long as it's the same viable as Unreal rendering, which it won't diminish any chance in the hiring process. No, like it has no effect on the hiring process at all. Because it is still, at the end of the day, it's still like a PBR real-time engine that you're rendering in, right? Yeah, so that doesn't matter. Cool, and then the last question, anything else that I should really do before doing the final renders? Yeah, honestly, the only thing that I would say is consider building like a little bit of a diorama. Like not a full diorama, right? I'm not talking about like a level or a room or something like that, but just put it on like a little bit of what is it, like red velvet material or something like that, and give it like a couple of creases. Something super simple, right? Yeah, some sort of a little table, 100%. Yep, that's definitely the thing that I would do here. You could also go for something like this, right? Like a very, very neutral lit scene. It could work really well if you think about like a metallic object. It could be worth trying out as well, like more like a studio setup. But it also is important to get the vibes across, right? Like it's important to realize what you wanna portray as well. So those are the things that I would add. The rest of it looks good. I like your UV layout as well. Um, very nice and tight and good. The only thing that I could say there, um, and it's a nitpick at that point, right? Like everything is nicely laid out, is I'm questioning why all the bolts are individual. But yeah, that's about it. I think the rest of it looks really nice. Nice use of space as well. Hello, Kevin. Also poly count if for games. Yeah, for sure. Like all the presentation techniques that we talk about regularly. Got it. Thanks a lot, Tim. No worries. To help. Then who is next? 3 people left. Bodhi is next. Bodhi is doing a freaking awesome job. I was really surprised by looking at this compared to what we looked at last time. This looks freaking awesome. I'm excited to talk about this and to dive into it, because this is looking great. You added a lot of text though, so give me a second. Let me see if I can split this up. So, firstly, I'm unsure about the layer of dust, but I still want to convey a sense of the hoverbike in the desert. Secondly, I'm not sure about the normal intensity on the metal of the back engine. Okay. Regarding the workflow, it may not be the most optimal approach. However, for the numbers and the stickers, I added floating meshes with a 1K texture. And the same textile density as the rest, where I want the decals. This allowed me to incorporate the dust scratches, and particularly the 2 on the front of the to match the texture without the numbers being mirrored. Oh, I see. I see. So this stuff over here, right? With some additional images. Yeah, okay. This is the same feeder as last week. I don't think we looked at this last week, but from the week before. So, but I mean, still, that doesn't detract from like it looking fucking awesome, you know? Great progression on this. So yeah, there is like an atlas here that has like the decals on it, right? What's the size? A 1K texture. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? Because like this is built out of like modular, like in a very modular way. I don't think this is gonna be an issue. No, I don't mind that at all. Just to answer that question really quickly. And then the last thing, oh sorry, 2 more things. Having difficulty with the orange colors. They tend to be either overly saturated or too muted. And then lastly, I have a presentation related question. While the lighting is not finalized, I'm wondering whether to use harsh lighting like the desert setting or opt for a studio setting. Okay. Cool. This is a case where I actually think the height information at the front could work. Just looks like the sand has wrecked the front of the bike. Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. That was one of the things that I was going to bring up as a discussion point, right? Because for other people, I've oftentimes said that like the height information here would be way too intense. But like Scott is saying, it's meant to be a hover bike. It's meant to be going quick, right? So the actual thick paint, like you really have like the thick layer of paint on top of it that's still peeled off, actually adds to the nature of the bike. So let's go through the questions again, right? And kind of break them up into individual ones. So the first one was the layer of dust, right? I tried to reduce it to significantly get some reflections, but I still want to convey the sense of the hover bike in a desert. I honestly don't think that this is like an issue that I would worry about. Like in the current renders, like I like how dirty it is. Like it kind of has a nice blend between, yeah, I'm racing with it all the time, but I'm also still proud of the thing that that I built myself, right? It kind of has like a nice mix between the two. So I honestly don't think that even though you reduce the dust, it like detracted from it. I don't think that's the case. And secondly, not sure about the normal intensity on the back of the engine. So you're talking about like this kind of stuff, right? I would, let's see. I would say, again, I don't mind it. It kind of goes with like the very aggressive feel that this object has, right? It's very much in line with what I would expect, I think. Especially because it's like the more the bigger pieces of the engine, right? If we had this amount of dirt or like this amount of normal intensity on these smaller parts, right? On like the whole surface, then I would have said something about it. But I think right now, I like the blend where it kind of catches the highlights here as well. That looks awesome. But I like the blend between that rougher area and like the more detailed, like mechanically balanced area, right? So no, I think it looks great, honestly. Love the look, especially, yeah. It's like you get a real feel of this person just like hammering stuff together and then balancing it with like ship parts that he found that are like machined somewhere, right? It kind of has that like nice balance to it. Also, this shot, so cool, man. Like the presentation looks really great. Shots are killer. I think, honestly, and the only reason why I can say that is because all the other shots look so killer, is that this shot is probably like the least one. Like the least... the least best one. Let me get out my best English for this one. And I think, honestly, that's only because the other renders are so great that this one stands out as being just like slightly less. What do you all think of it? Like, I'm curious to hear what people in the chat think about this one. Because I think it still looks... Okay, let me just make a distinction for me personally, right? I think this looks good, like this render, but the other ones look great. So, Benji Wong is saying, for me, the blurry floor is distracting from the main model. That's actually an interesting point. I mean, yeah, I get why it's there, right? You're trying to convey the sense of like speed. Yeah, I can see that happening. Bodhi is saying, yeah, I haven't worked on it too much yet. Oh, okay, sorry, that's fine. But I want a shot where you can clearly see everything to show the wireframe and all. I see. That will be a turntable. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, that could work, right? But I kind of have the feeling that if you were to light your interior like a little bit more like as a studio setting, right? That it could have like a better look compared to the outdoor one. But I also, this is the thing, right? I don't want to shoot the idea down because I like the contrast that you're making where you have like the dark, moody shots from the interior, and then you have like the external shots where we can see the thing in action, right? So I don't want to say don't do it. Like I want to avoid that as much as I can, but it would be interesting to see like the full sequence, so to say, of all of them together and how they would match together, right? Because yeah, I do get what you're saying, but I feel like there might be like another solution for that. Like as like a gut instinct, right? I think again, still try it, right? Because I think there is something to having the contrast there, and I'm curious how you're gonna do that. Let's dive into some more questions, right? Like the two last ones. I'm having difficulty with the orange colors. They tend to appear overly saturated or too muted. I honestly, from the stuff that I'm seeing here, I honestly don't mind. And the reason for that being is because, again, it works perfectly within the world building, right? I can imagine this thing either being maintained for like the next race, like really quickly, or being out on the desert plains, right? And what's gonna happen if you raise this thing in the sun, a lot of the time, there's gonna be sun bleaching that's gonna happen. Sun bleaching is an effect where it like decreases the saturation of your colors because the sun erodes the colors, right? You'll see that on like old signs or like old posters or something like that. Like sun bleaching is a really interesting effect, and I think honestly like it perfectly is encapsulated here. So I think the colors are spot on, you know. And then lastly, I have a presentation related question. I'm wondering whether to use the harsh lighting like a desert setting or opt for studio lighting with just the ground providing context. With this question, Bodhi, what are you talking about? Are you talking about like the presenting the wireframes and the textures and all that stuff, or just like the final presentation? Because if I had to pick between these two renders, for example, oh, so basically what we discussed before then, right? Like where you want to present like your wait, let me read that again. Hmm. Um. Oh, I see. I see. I see what you were trying to say. In that case, so this is soft lighting instead of harsh lighting, right? Because you want this picture to serve the purpose of visual clarity, right? Go for soft lighting instead of harsh lighting. Because if you do harsh lighting, you're gonna have to contend with like more intense shadowing and all that kind of stuff, right? So I would honestly keep it to like soft lighting and yeah, do it like you're doing already. Yeah. Stuff looks great, Bodhi. Great work. So I feel like we talked about a lot of stuff and I was basically just like, looks awesome. But hey, sometimes it's gonna be like that, you know? If it's great, then it's great. I think honestly, like the thing that I want to say the most is like whatever you're gonna do for the presentation of the wireframe, right? Make sure that it matches like the visual fidelity and the interesting shots that you have surrounding it. So this needs to be at this level, or like all the rest, right? That's honestly the main thing that I have to say. And I think it could honestly be as simple as, again, making it a bit more fuller, right? Like having like a couple of rocks and like making it like a little bit of a world. Potentially even if you really want to sell the effect, and you might kind of hate me for this, but like have a character on there that is posed to be on the bike, right? Really sell the effect of it. I think that would be like the cherry on top of the cake, right? If I was telling myself that, especially like a couple of years ago, I would be like, yeah, no way. So I'm gonna leave that decision up to you, right? But yeah, that would be freaking awesome to see. Hello, Bulbarb. Yeah, no. Again, awesome work, Bodhi. I love the world building that you're doing. I love the additional set dressing. This stuff looks fucking awesome. I love it. Great work. So I was thinking about that, but I thought it was better without, so you can see the model. Yeah. So what I would do in that case, right, is you would have your world building screenshot, right, where you could see the guy racing the actual thing, and then you would have the breakdown screenshots without the guy and the thing just floating, without like the blurry background and all that stuff, right? That's the kind of like sequence that I would kind of see, where I mean, I'm gonna leave the sequence up to you. You know what you're doing. I trust you, man. So yeah. Nah, great stuff. Great stuff, Bodhi. Next up, we have Marcelo in here with a little Deadloop fan art. Let's have a look here. I'm finalizing my render setup before finishing the textures and adding the telephone cable. What do you think? Let's see. It looks good. It's an interesting looking prop. I think yeah, looks pretty interesting. Let's see. There's some ref that we can dive into. With a little plug on the back. The wire is still to do, so it's gonna be awesome to see. Yeah, having something in the middle of this section is going to be really interesting too, right? So having like a little bit of text here, like a fake brand or something. It's gonna be nice, but I'm assuming that you're still gonna do that because you're still working on it as well to refine like the texturing and stuff. That's all good. I would also watch out for like the polygons here. We can kind of see, especially because we have this like line going across it, that you probably just want to add like a little bit more geo here. Especially because the rest of the asset looks pretty good, right? Well, nah, honestly, to be honest, let me retract that because I think it is nice and consistent. And again, we're really zoomed into it, right? Yeah. Don't mind. Yeah, and some other people in the chat, in our community chat, brought up Discord. Brought up that there's like a couple of missing holes, right? But those are still going to be added too. That's going to be cool. Oh, probably in the other one. Yeah. Yeah, this guy. Oh, it's cool. Cool little prop. Cool little palette cleanser. I like the presentation as well. I mean, it's clear where you got it from, right? The main thing that I would say, being very specific, is Deadloop. Like, this is how it's spelled, right? It has like the quotation marks like right next to it. So that would be cool to incorporate that to do justice to the official logo as well. Yeah, this is an interesting one. Like, I'm drawn to these areas again, right? So like a little more geo here. It's only because the rest of it is so crisp, right? I'm always looking at it in comparison. Where you can see like a nice crisp shape and you have like these jagged edges. So that could definitely use like a bit more geo. Yeah. It's cool though. Nice little prop. And this brings up the question, right? Because we did talk a little bit about this before. Whether or not to include the name of a game that you're making fan art for. So I think, so there was an opinion from some people that they really dislike branding stuff with game names, right? Even if it's fan art and says so. So I think opinions are always going to be split on this. I think the opposite could also happen, where if you see like fan art for your game, like it could be like really interesting, and it could be like a point of praise, right? So I'm always like really split because the reasons why I gave for people kind of hating fan art is this, right? Where you have the title of the game, and then like maybe it's even smaller, right? Like fan art, like underneath it, where you can't really see that on a thumbnail, and it's quite deceptive in that But if you make it big enough on your thumbnail and you're being very outspoken about it, I don't mind, right? Plus, also, like, if you're honestly like a really big fan of like the game that you're doing the fan art for, then you're gonna call it like fan art from that game, right? So I don't think it's bad at all. Just don't be like disingenuous about it, right? Don't try to hide that it's fan art, and I think then you should all be good. Doo-doo-doo. Yeah, this is looking good. Oh, there was Oh, okay, we got some wireframe as well. Some wireframey boys. Okay. I'm gonna bring one up here. Because I kind of want to discuss what's happening, right? So the issue is not necessarily, well, maybe on the outer shape it kind of is. Yeah, that's interesting. I think this might just be like lighting or bake, but like with having topology like this, right? What you want to do is you want to make your topology like kind of fit the loops, right? I think that's like an important thing here. That you have like an additional edge here, for example. I don't think you can do anything with this little edge, because if you do, then you're gonna change the flow of this loop, right? So you can't really do anything here unless you also add one here then. I know we're kind of nitpicking on the topology, right? I think it's important to get that consistency in there. Keep them loops consistent. Hello, McVal. How's the stream been going? Yeah, it's been going good. Chilling out, looking at some amazing work. Don't complain, right? Oh, that's the main thing that I want to say. I think honestly, like the cord, the telephone cord is gonna add a lot to it. The holes for like the speakers and like the listening is gonna add a lot to it as well. And then, you know, like some fake branding on it could be really cool as well. Get those fake brands on there. Could be like a good thing to world build, right? No, but great stuff, Marcelo. It's actually like a really nice prop just to get back into the swing of things. So great stuff. And then last but not least, we have Sheila. Sheila has been grinding away on this. She's asking for some general feedback. And I think I need to place the grass and the moss better. Okay, interesting. And finish placing the foliage. Is there anything that you could think that could be improved or changed at the scene at this stage? Yeah, honestly, I think the placement of the foliage is probably going to be the biggest one here, right? You can definitely just use foliage to your advantage more. Because you kind of have like a little bit going on here. Like a little clump over here, like a little clump. Like if you look at this, like it feels like there's like it's very naturey, right? Like there's a lot of stuff going on here. And like it kind of blends into each other as well. And it's also, it's also very, like, a bit more chaotic, right? Like, sometimes you need a good bit of chaos to make foliage look really good. Because you kind of... I can tell you were, like, really deliberate about, like, placing the foliage, right? Because it kind of has, like, a very natural path. But sometimes it's good to... Or sometimes it could be really helpful to just add it to the foliage painter and just paint, you know, and let it do its thing. And then go into, like, a single selection mode and just remove the ones that are kind of, like, overlapping. So you're actually using, like, a procedural system to let it dictate, like, how it's gonna look, and then you can add onto it and, like, kind of tweak the individual things to make it look better than it did. That's something that I love to do myself. And yeah, lots more foliage. I think being, like, more specific with, like, all the little rocks, right? Like, you have, like, lots of little rocks, and you have, like, a bigger one, and then you have, like, a big rock. More shapes in here. Like, basically having, like, a big rock here, and then, like, a couple, like a chunky rock, and then maybe, like, a smaller one. And then also making sure that these candles, like, make sense, right? That there's, like, a rock in place that can kind of hold them in place as well. I know that, like, the placement of the river is kind of, like, early at the moment, right? So but it is, again, story of big, medium, small, right? Where you wanna build up your shapes in that's readable, but you want to make sure that you build your shapes into, like, a big cluster, and then you have, like, a medium cluster next to it, and then maybe, like, some small stuff, you know? Get some hierarchy in there. Same can be seen here, like, even though, like, it's a concept art, right? Like, so we have to kind of take, like, creative liberties. You can see that there's, like, big shape, and then you have, like, smaller shapes, and then you have, like, the really small stuff. Right, and it kind of creates, like, a very nice layering. Same happens here as well, right? Like, we have, like, the big shapes, medium shapes, and then we got, like, smaller shapes. But yeah, the shapes are going to be important. Like, honestly, sometimes what I do is I don't even look at the prop and what the prop is looks like individually, right? I'm more focused around, like, what are the shapes? Like, getting the shapes right first, and then I can tweak the prop to kind of make work with the shape, or, like, with the prop a little bit more. Talking about shapes, if we continue the conversation a little bit, make, like, you can scale. Let's see. Let's compare the two. You could almost, like, scale the candles up by, like, 150% or, like, 50%, depending on how you calculate stuff, and make them, like, really chunky. You know, like, give this space, like, chunky candles. Because some of them, they kind of feel too flimsy and too small, right? So yeah, make them chunky. And again, what you could do is you could have, like, a shape hierarchy in that too, right? Where you could have, like, the bigger candles here, and then you just have, like, the smaller candles over here, so that people are attracted to, like, the chunkier shapes over here. So yeah, scale these up. That could be awesome. The rest of it is starting to look really nice, though. I like the blending that's happening with the trees. Like, oh, look at the silhouette of the tree, looking so good. Nice attention to detail. I love it. Yes. Always a pleasure looking at your work, Sheila. Like the attention to detail that you pay. Really nice to see. Yeah, I think honestly, like you were spot on, right? Placing more grass, more foliage, more moss, placing it better as well. Like thinking about the clumping technique that we talked about today. Obviously making the waterfalls and doing like all the particles is going to add a ton to the scene. Other than that, I think you kind of hit it on the head, right? I think if you do that and you just keep paying attention to the details and you kind of do this kind of stuff a little bit more, right? That we get like a more interesting like background. Again, it's silhouettes, right? We're working with silhouettes. Like this stuff just makes the silhouette of this rock like more interesting. You can do the same thing here, right? Like it's doing in the concept too. But yeah. I love seeing the progression of this scene. So keep it up. Yeah, looking good. Let me try something. There's actually... Okay, I just want to see if this makes sense. I'm gonna put them next to each other. The reason why I'm doing this is because I kind of had this feeling that I don't know. I kind of had the feeling that in your scene, like everything seems to be less tall, right? So like the proportions feel like kind of shrunken vertically. It's a tiny thing. I don't think it's necessarily true either. Something I need to get off my brain. Yeah. I think atmosphere, like atmospherics is gonna do a lot here too, right? Where like all this like the blue tones, right? Not only from like the waterfall, but also from like the fog in the distance. It's gonna look really good as well. Yeah, no. I would say let's keep it at that. I'm just honestly curious where you're gonna take it. You're making some really nice progress. Yeah. Oh, it's cool. Thanks so much for sharing your work, Sheila. I'm excited to see where this goes. Let's see. Oh, we had one new post. Correct. Oh no, that's not for Whip Wednesday. I think we're good. Nice. Okay. Let's see. Let me make sure that we have everyone, right? Because I have the tendency to forget people. Okay, no, I think we're good. Cool. So, what's gonna happen now is after the stream, I'm gonna save all these images out. I'm gonna drop them in your personal work in progress thread so that you can check this out with a link to the live stream as well. Yeah, just big shout out to everyone for participating. Like, it's always a pleasure to look at your work and, like, you know, allowing me to give feedback as well. It's amazing to see like all these projects grow and kind of follow the progress of everyone, right? And I totally agree with Leonardo. That jet bike was so awesome. 100% agree. I think the jet bike from Bodhi, the progress that was made since the last time we've seen it, oh my god, so stunning. And I truly mean that, you know, like these shots, they're killer. They look so good. So awesome job, Bodhi. Of course, like awesome job, everyone, right? Like, everyone is doing a great job. It's really nice to see everyone progress. That being said, thanks everyone for being here as well. Thanks for participating in the stream. If you want to get feedback on a weekly basis as well, just become a member. I'll be here every week on every Wednesday. Or just if you want to hang out in like a nice community, join us, you know. That being said, I'll speak to y'all later. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.